Van Gogh. Poets lovers. In February 1888, the Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh, 1853-1890, went to live and work in the south of France. Over the next 2 years, in Botheros and Saint-Rémy province, he created an extraordinary and innovative body of work in which he transformed the people in places he encountered in life. Parks, landscapes and corners of nature became high expressive, idealized spaces full of literary and poetic references. Similarly, Van Gogh chose individuals from his new surroundings to create portraits of symbolic types, such as the poet or the lover. The careful planning behind Van Gogh's art extended to creating works in groups or series, and to thinking about these might be displayed both at his home in Arles and for exhibition in Paris. By gathering a selection of these paintings, many of which are among his most famous and beloved creations, and showing them alongside his carefully developed works on paper, a less familiar Van Gogh emerges. An intellectual artist of lucid intention, deliberation and great ambition. This first major exhibition devoted to Van Gogh in the National Gallery's history is chief among the events celebrating the gallery's bicentenary. It also marks 100 years since the gallery purchased these in flowers and Van Gogh's chair for the collection. The Lover, portrait of Lieutenant Milliot, 1888. Milliot's success with women, about which Van Gogh was both amused and envious, made the lieutenant the perfect model for the lover. Van Gogh depicts Milliot in the dashing uniform of Zouaves, one of the infantry on its link to North Africa, whose star and crescent regimental emblem Van Gogh reverses, for reasons unknown, in the background. The men became friends in Arles, with Van Gogh giving Milliot drawing lessons. Oil on canvas. Kröller-Müller Museum, Otterlo, the Netherlands. The Poet's Garden, public garden in Arles, 1888. The unremarkable public garden in front of Van Gogh's home in Arles was starting point for many views in which he used artistic license and his imagination to create idealist worlds. He described site in which young lovers stand in the shade of a spreading fir tree as the Poet's Garden, and imagined it as a place frequented by artists and writers of the past. Oil on canvas. Private collection.
3.
The Poet, portrait of Uni Bach, 1888. Van Gogh had detailed plans for how he would depict a poet some time before he found Uni Bach, a painter, to be his model. Van Gogh felt Bach was ideal as he had a narrow face that reminded him of the 13th century poet Dante. The deep blue sky behind the figure, intended to express a man who dreams great dreams, was essential to the symbolism of the work. Oil on canvas. Musée d'Orsay, Paris, bequest of Uni Bach, 1941.
Room 2.
The Garden. Poet's interpretation. Van Gogh chose a great variety of motifs from the public garden in front of his home in Arles and later, within the confines of the grounds of the Hospital of Saint Paul de Moselle at Saint-Rémy province. In his paintings and works on paper, he selected specific viewpoints and varied his approach to style and use of color to explore wide-ranging emotional and poetic possibilities, often with a literary or artistic source in mind. In aiming to convey meaning rather than accurately record nature, Van Gogh took a free hand in adjusting or recomposing what he observed to achieve his desired effects.
4.
The Public Garden, Arles, 1888. Van Gogh repeatedly drew and painted views of the gardens in Arles over the summer of 1888. On 22 October he wrote to his brother Theo, 1857-1891, to say that, despite promising himself not to work, he could not resist painting the park's autumn colors. But it's like that every day, sometimes in passing you find such beautiful things that in the end you have to try to do them anyway. Oil on canvas. Private collection. Entrance to the Public Garden in Arles, 1888. The gardens in Arles inspired contrasting moods. Van Gogh depicted this view of the park as an everyday scene. He described the locales as something out of Dalmire, come to life, a reference to the French artist famous for his caricatures. There is a comical edge to figures such as the man in worker's blue transfixed by his newspaper, possibly Van Gogh himself, and the squat woman laboring up the path. Oil on canvas. The Phillips Collection, Washington, D.C.
Acquired 1930.
The Garden. Poet's interpretation. Van Gogh chose a great variety of motifs from the public garden in front of his home in Arles and later, within the confines of the grounds of the Hospital of Saint Paul de Moselle at Saint-Rémy province. In his paintings and works on paper, he selected specific viewpoints and varied his approach to style and use of color to explore wide-ranging emotional and poetic possibilities, often with a literary or artistic source in mind. In aiming to convey meaning rather than accurately record nature, Van Gogh took a free hand in adjusting or recomposing what he observed to achieve his desired effects. Hill Path in the Park, Arles, 1888. The park in front of the Yellow House, Van Gogh's home in Arles, was close to the town station. Yet in this view groups of colorfully dressed figures, moving beneath trees appearless like passers-by, than participants in a ft galanti, or elegant outdoor entertainment, as imagined by artists Jean-Antoine Watteau, 1684-1721, and Adolphe Monticelli, 1824-1886. Van Gogh admired both artists. Oil on Canvas. Kröller-Müller Museum, Otterlo, the Netherlands.
7. Undergrowth, 1889.
Van Gogh became fascinated by the large, neglected garden of the hospital at Saint-Remy, to which he admitted himself in May 1889, after a series of mental breakdowns in the preceding months. In this innovative composite, he looks directly down into the dense undergrowth and ivy that climbs nearby trees. The richly textured, swirling paint evokes the dense vegetation as well as the dappled light that breaks into open sunlight at the top of the canvas. Oil on Canvas. Van Gogh Museum, Amsterdam. Vincent van Gogh Foundation.
8.
The Garden of the Asylum at Saint-Remy, 1889. This was one of the first works Van Gogh painted after arriving at the hospital at Saint-Remy. During his first weeks, Van Gogh was not allowed to be in the hospital garden but found delight in its overgrown and intimate corners, which he associated with nests of greenery for lovers, continuing a poetic theme he had explored in the park in Arles. Oil on Canvas. Kröller-Müller Museum, Otterlo, the Netherlands. Flowering Shrubs, 1889. Chalk, brush, diluted oil paint and pencil on paper. Colección Presum, Mexico. Number 10. Tree and Bushes in the Garden of the Asylum, 1889. Chalk, brush and oil paint and ink, on paper. Van Gogh Museum, Amsterdam. Vincent van Gogh Foundation. These close-up views of shrubs and flowers were made during Van Gogh's first weeks at Saint-Remy in May-June 1889. His assured, rapid application of bold dashes, hatching, dots and swirls capture the different textures of the vegetation to create richly patterned surfaces. The works on paper belong to a small and unique group in diluted paint in which Van Gogh sought to capture the vibrancy and profusion of spring growth, as well as his excitement at the artistic possibilities offered by his new environment. Number 11. A corner of the Garden of St. Paul's Hospital at Saint-Remy, 1889, using soft graphite and ink on pinkish paper. This ambitious drawing is the most finished of a group Van Gogh made of this corner of the hospital garden. Above a fence, a row of pines with irregular, windswept growth shelters the overgrown grass below, which is dotted with flowers such as the foreground irises. The bending gardener or laborer may have been someone Van Gogh observed, but could equally have been invented. Graphite and ink on paper, Tate. Bequeathed by C. Frank Stoop, 1933. Number 12. The Garden of the Asylum with Sawn Off Tree, 1889. By the autumn of 1889, Van Gogh turned from his initial interpretation of the hospital's garden as a nest for lovers to seeing it as a site of suffering. In this drawing, related to the painted work that hangs alongside, 13, Van Gogh attempted to convey this sense of anguish via the intensity of his pen strokes. These capture the dense growth of the pine trees and the rain puddles on the path, black chalk, quill and red pen and brown ink on paper, private collection. Number 13. The Park of the Hospital at Saint-Remy, 1889. Melancholy permeates this powerful depiction of the garden at Saint-Remy, which is dominated by a sawn-off pine tree that had been struck by lightning. In a letter to his friend, the painter Émile Bernard, 1868-1941, in November 1889, Van Gogh described the tree as a dark giant, like a proud man brought low, and detailed how he combined composition, color and technique to convey the anxiety felt by his fellow patients at the hospital. Oil on Canvas, Museum Folkwang, Essen. Number 14. Hospital at Saint-Remy, 1889. Van Gogh chose a vertical format to give full height to the massive pine trees that dwarfed the male wing of the hospital building. The reddish soil, highly stylized tree trunks and interlocking branches overhead produce a vibrant but oppressive environment within which Van Gogh engages a number of figures, including perhaps himself, just left of center. The Women Air and Invention. Female patients weren't allowed in this part of the grounds. Oil on canvas. The Arm & Hammer Collection, gift of the Arm & Hammer Foundation, Hammer Museum, Los Angeles. Number 15. Trees in the Garden of the Asylum, 1889. Two curving tree trunks, cropped at the top and bottom of the picture, frame a view towards one of the terraced lawns at the edge of the hospital gardens. Van Gogh greatly admired and collected Japanese woodblock prints, in which such dramatic composition devices were common. This work's graphic quality is counterbalanced by his choice to paint a